Carl Jung's warning. When the empath finally sees the family narcissism trap, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Many empaths spend years trapped in a web of guilt, obligation, and emotional manipulation, often within their own families, before realizing the truth. Love without boundaries is not love. It's self-betrayal. In today's episode on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore Carl Jung's profound warning about the family narcissism trap and how awakening to it is the first step toward emotional freedom and spiritual growth. Have you ever felt like the peacekeeper in your family, absorbing everyone's pain but never being seen for your own? Share your experience in the comments below, and let's begin this journey toward clarity, healing, and true self-empowerment together. 1. The awakening and the family illusion. The empath's true spiritual awakening begins in a moment of quiet realization, the moment they see that the love they grew up with was not love at all, but a subtle form of control. In families ruled by emotional manipulation, affection becomes currency and belonging becomes a contract. The home, which Carl Jung described as the first symbolic God a child encounters, teaches the empath early on that love must be earned through silence, compliance, and invisibility. To belong, they must disappear. To be accepted, they must abandon their true self. And so, the empath learns to read the room instead of reading their own heart, to carry the emotions of others while neglecting their own. But every illusion eventually cracks. One day, the empath's inner self whispers the forbidden truth. Love should not hurt, and compassion should not cost your soul. This is where the spiritual awakening begins, not in a temple or a sacred book, but in the heartbreak of seeing one's family through unfiltered eyes. The empath realizes that what they called family loyalty was emotional bondage, that guilt was a tool used to maintain control, and that their constant self-sacrifice only served to feed the narcissistic system. They see how the family's false version of love demanded obedience, not honesty, and submission, not sincerity. Carl Jung warned that what is not made conscious will repeat as fate. The empath now sees that their pain was inherited, that they were trained to keep the family's secrets, to absorb shame that was never theirs, and to mediate chaos that existed long before their birth. This recognition is painful, but liberating. It reveals how deeply generational patterns of narcissism and emotional dependency run. The empath starts asking new questions. Why do I always feel responsible for everyone's happiness? Why does peace feel like danger? These questions awaken the soul from its programmed trance. This stage of awakening is not glamorous. It's raw and disorienting. The empath begins to detach, to say no, to step back. Every boundary feels like betrayal because the family taught them that love equals sacrifice. Yet slowly, they learn that saying no is not rejection, it is protection. That choosing peace is not selfish, it is sacred. True spirituality is not an escape from pain, but the courage to face it, to descend into the unconscious and reclaim what was lost there: self-respect, authenticity, and freedom. The empath begins to rebuild from within. They create a new kind of home, one not defined by fear or obligation, but by truth and inner alignment. They learn that compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction, and that genuine love never requires you to disappear. Through awareness, they stop overgiving and start existing fully. They no longer seek validation from those who cannot see them. Instead, they find power in solitude, clarity in silence, and divinity in self-acceptance. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The empath who awakens becomes that living truth. No longer trapped in the family's illusion, they embody the rare balance between heart and discernment, softness and strength. This is the real essence of spiritual awakening, seeing the illusion clearly, forgiving it, and walking free. It is where suffering turns to wisdom, and love finally returns to its purest form. The love that begins within. Comment below. I choose truth over illusion. If you're ready to awaken from the family trap and embrace your spiritual clarity. 2. The birth of the empath and the cycle of control. Empaths often emerge from emotional storms rather than calm skies. Their deep sensitivity is not accidental. It is the result of adapting to a chaotic environment where emotional survival depends on intuition. Growing up around unpredictable moods, criticism, or cold detachment forces the empath to develop an almost psychic ability to sense shifts in energy. They learn to stay silent when tension rises, to soothe others before conflict erupts, and to measure their worth by how well they can maintain peace. What begins as a defense mechanism becomes an identity. As Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Yet for many empaths, their path of spirituality and spiritual development begins with realizing they've been living as someone everyone else needed them to be. In families where love is conditional, empathy becomes a transaction. The child unconsciously believes that being good, helpful, and understanding will guarantee affection and safety. This creates a hidden belief system, a psychic contract that says, if I suffer enough, if I heal others enough, I will finally be loved. The empath grows up believing that love must be earned through self-sacrifice. This illusion becomes the root of a painful cycle. They feel responsible for other people's emotions and equate healing others with proving their own worth. In narcissistic family systems, this becomes the perfect setup for control. The narcissistic parent feeds on attention and validation, while subtly teaching the empath that their needs don't matter. The empath becomes the caretaker, the fixer, and the emotional anchor in a sea of manipulation, confusing guilt with love and loyalty with bondage. As this pattern extends into adulthood, empaths often attract partners and friends who mirror their original wound. They are drawn to familiar pain, those who are charming yet emotionally unavailable, demanding yet fragile. Something deep within them whispers that if they can just love harder, be more patient, more forgiving, then this time it will work. This time, love will stay. But this is the illusion of the empath's heart, the belief that love can heal someone who refuses to confront their own shadow. Carl Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The empath, until awakened, keeps repeating the same emotional story under the name of compassion. Then comes the breaking point, the sacred moment of awakening. It's when exhaustion replaces empathy, when silence becomes heavier than words, and when the empath finally realizes that no amount of love can fill a void someone chooses to keep. This is the beginning of spiritual clarity, the understanding that compassion without boundaries is not love, but self-erasure. Spirituality teaches that to awaken is to see truth without distortion, And one of the hardest truths is that you cannot save those who use your empathy as fuel for their ego. The empath's healing begins when they stop pouring into emptiness and start nurturing their own light. What once felt like abandonment now becomes alignment. The focus shifts from fixing others to freeing oneself. Through this transformation, empathy evolves into power. Sensitivity becomes discernment. The heart that once bled for others learns to beat for itself. This is the essence of spiritual development learning, that love is not measured by suffering, but by authenticity. When you say no without guilt, when you walk away without anger, when you choose peace over chaos, you honor both your soul and your purpose. The empath's journey is not to carry the pain of others, but to become an example of healed energy, one who no longer mistakes pain for connection or control for love. And in that awareness, the empath finally breaks the cycle, transforming inherited wounds into wisdom and finding that the true act of love was never about saving others. It was about saving themselves. 3. The narcissistic family system. In a narcissistic family system, Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom unveils a dark yet illuminating truth about how dysfunction shapes identity and emotion. One parent becomes the wounded tyrant, demanding control, validation, and emotional obedience to mask their own insecurity. The other turns into the enabler, choosing silence and denial over confrontation, pretending that peace exists, when in reality, it is built on fear. The children, unknowingly trapped in this web, assume rigid roles. The golden child shines to earn love, the scapegoat absorbs the blame to maintain balance, and the empath becomes the healer, the emotional sponge who carries everyone's unspoken pain. The empath's compassion, once a divine gift, turns into a survival mechanism. They confuse servitude with love, exhaustion with loyalty, and people-pleasing with peace. They grow up believing that their worth depends on how well they can fix, soothe, and save others, never realizing that this love is conditional, manipulated, and used to sustain the family illusion. As years pass, the empath starts to awaken a painful, sacred process that Carl Jung called individuation, the journey toward one's true self. This awakening begins when the empath finally sees the trap, that love was never meant to be earned through suffering. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the empath, this means recognizing that the constant pull to rescue others was not compassion, but conditioning. It was a pattern inherited from generations of emotional pain disguised as duty. Through spiritual wisdom, they realize that compassion without boundaries is self-betrayal, and silence in the face of dysfunction is not kindness. It is fear wearing a mask of peace. The empath's healing comes when they stop internalizing other people's chaos and begin to honor their own peace. They understand that not every cry for help deserves a response, and not every wound is theirs to heal. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. This pain is the fire that forges self-awareness, teaching the empath that love without self-respect is just another form of imprisonment. They learn to set boundaries without guilt, to say no without apology, and to detach from those who drain their light. What once felt like betrayal now becomes liberation, the sacred act of choosing themselves. This transformation is not cold or selfish. It is spiritual maturity. It is the realization that true empathy does not mean absorbing another's suffering, but reflecting it back with clarity and truth. In this awakening, the empath's sensitivity evolves into discernment. Their compassion becomes conscious rather than compulsive. They no longer confuse emotional dependency for intimacy or mistake chaos for connection. They begin to see the family not through the lens of obligation, but through understanding, realizing that every role, from tyrant to scapegoat, was born of pain. But while they can forgive, they also learn that forgiveness does not mean returning to dysfunction. Healing may not mean reconciliation. It may simply mean release. The empath reclaims their voice, their boundaries, and their light. They finally understand that protecting their energy is not rejection. It is love in its highest form. And through this profound journey of spiritual wisdom and self-realization, they embody Carl Jung's truth. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Do you feel this truth within your soul? Comment below. I see through the illusion. I awaken now. 4. Awakening through individuation. True awakening happens when the empath finally stops performing for love and begins the sacred process of individuation, the separation from the family myth that once defined their identity. This myth is built on silent rules and emotional contracts where the empath learns that love is earned through compliance, emotional caretaking, and endless giving. In this illusion, the empath becomes the family's anchor, absorbing pain, maintaining peace, and hiding their own truth to keep others comfortable. But as the light of awareness begins to rise, something deep within the empath starts to rebel. They begin to see that the constant need to fix, please, or save others is not love. It is emotional bondage disguised as virtue. What feels like loyalty to the family is often a betrayal of the self, and when that realization dawns, it marks the beginning of true spirituality and spiritual awakening. The process of individuation feels like betrayal because it dismantles the false self, the persona created to survive emotional manipulation and conditional affection. When the empath starts reclaiming their boundaries, when they stop absorbing others' chaos, they encounter a wave of guilt that feels unbearable. This guilt, however, is not a sign of wrongdoing. It is the death cry of the false identity. It is the residue of old programming, proof that the empath is finally stepping out of emotional servitude and into authenticity. Carl Jung called this process the confrontation with the shadow, the awakening of the unconscious into light. The empath, once trained to suppress anger and sadness, begins to see these emotions as sacred messengers of balance rather than flaws to be hidden. Saying no becomes an act of divine reclamation, a statement that love does not require self-betrayal. As the empath awakens, the emotional architecture of their life begins to shift. The old roles, the healer, the forgiver, the peacekeeper, begin to dissolve. There is grief, because each role carried a sense of belonging. Yet, in that grief, the empath begins to glimpse a deeper truth. Love that demands the death of the self is not love, but control. The pain of separation becomes the bridge to freedom. What once felt like abandonment now feels like alignment. This is the quiet revolution of the soul that Jung spoke of, the movement from persona to self, from illusion to truth. Through this sacred unraveling, the empath learns that healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means walking away with peace in your heart and clarity in your eyes. The deeper the empath surrenders to this spiritual awakening, the more they realize that guilt and loneliness are temporary visitors, guiding them toward authenticity. What feels like death is actually resurrection, the rebirth of the true self after years of suppression. In this rebirth, spirituality becomes an embodied experience, not an idea. The empath begins to see life through the eyes of consciousness rather than fear. The approval they once craved loses its power, and the presence they radiate begins to speak louder than any apology ever could. They discover that real love does not demand sacrifice of the soul, but invites truth to blossom. Through individuation, the empath rises as a whole being balanced, awakened, and free, no longer trapped in the family's narrative, but finally living as the author of their own. 5. The mirror of narcissism. Carl Jung revealed a profound truth. Narcissism and empathy are two faces of the same archetype, both born from the same wound, but expressed in opposite ways. The narcissist hides from tenderness, afraid that vulnerability will expose weakness, while the empath hides from power, afraid that strength will make them unworthy of love. This dynamic creates a mirror. One reflects domination, the other submission, and both are trapped in unconscious patterns of survival. Within a narcissistic family, the empath becomes the caretaker, believing peace depends on their ability to absorb pain, to stay quiet, to be good. They grow up equating love with exhaustion, thinking harmony means losing themselves. Yet as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. True spirituality and spiritual development begin the moment the empath dares to look into this mirror and realizes that rescuing others is not love. It is self-abandonment disguised as compassion. When you finally wake up to this truth, it shakes the foundation of your identity. You start to see that the love you offered so freely was often a plea for acceptance, that your empathy became a shield protecting you from rejection. Jung's teaching on individuation reminds us that healing demands integration, uniting tenderness with strength, compassion with boundaries, love with truth. This integration is not about becoming harder. It is about becoming whole. When you reclaim your right to say no, when you stop apologizing for existing, the mirror of narcissism begins to shatter. The reflection that once defined you no longer holds power, and in its place arises a new image, one rooted in self-respect, awareness, and emotional sovereignty. The process is not painless. It feels like rebellion, like betraying everything you were taught to believe about love and family. You might feel guilt for standing up, shame for wanting peace that doesn't require your suffering. But this discomfort is sacred. It marks the end of illusion and the beginning of truth. Spiritual wisdom teaches that light is meaningless without shadow, and love is incomplete without power. The empath's anger, long suppressed, becomes the fire that purifies their spirit. Their voice, once silenced, becomes the sound of awakening. As your spiritual development unfolds, you begin to understand that love rooted in self-erasure is not love, it's bondage. And the moment you honor your boundaries, you set both yourself and others free. Jung warned that the empath's greatest challenge is to stop trying to heal those who refuse to heal themselves. The true act of love is not saving the narcissist, but saving yourself from their gravitational pull. When you no longer seek validation from pain, you transcend the cycle of emotional codependency. You start attracting people who see your worth instead of those who feed on your guilt. You begin to embody balanced energy where compassion flows without depletion and power stands without cruelty. This is what spirituality truly is, not escaping the world, but standing in it with clarity, strength, and grace. The mirror of narcissism, once a source of confusion, becomes a sacred teacher. It shows you how love twisted by fear leads to suffering, and how self-awareness transforms that suffering into wisdom. The empath's journey is not about choosing between love and strength. It's about realizing they were never separate. Power guided by empathy becomes presence. Empathy strengthened by power becomes truth. And from that unity, a new form of love is born. One that no longer asks, "Am I enough?" but simply radiates, "I am." Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on how to recognize the mirror of narcissism and reclaim your true power as an empath. Stay tuned. Your awakening has only just begun. 6. Descent into the shadow and rebirth. When the empath begins the descent into their own unconscious, they enter what Carl Jung described as the dark night of the soul, a sacred initiation where spiritual wisdom is forged through suffering, self-confrontation, and truth. This is not a fall into despair, but a return to authenticity. Here, the empath comes face to face with the emotions they were taught to suppress: anger, jealousy, grief, and resentment. They begin to understand that these feelings are not moral failings, but exiled parts of the psyche that have been silenced to maintain harmony in a dysfunctional system. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. In this process, the empath begins to reclaim their own power, realizing that what they once viewed as darkness was simply unlived life waiting to be acknowledged. As the empath journeys deeper, they begin to see that their sensitivity has always been their mirror, reflecting not only the emotions of others, but their own buried truths. The family narcissism trap depends on the empath's denial of their pain, keeping them stuck in cycles of guilt, compliance, and over-responsibility. When they begin to look within, instead of fixing those around them, they see how much of their love was shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being enough. Yet it is through this awareness that the empath awakens to spiritual wisdom. The understanding that love without boundaries is self-abandonment. They start to realize that true compassion is not the endless giving of oneself, but the courage to honor one's soul. Carl Jung believed that what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. The empath learns this truth intimately as they stop resisting their shadow. They learn that anger is not evil. It is a signal that a boundary has been crossed. Jealousy reveals a hidden longing for recognition. Grief uncovers a love that was never properly expressed. Each emotion, once feared, becomes a key, unlocking a deeper layer of consciousness. This is the moment of inner alchemy when pain transforms into wisdom, chaos becomes clarity, and the empath evolves from a wounded caretaker into an aware creator. Through this transformation, the empath no longer mirrors others' dysfunction, but radiates authenticity and spiritual strength. As the light returns, the empath realizes that they were never broken, only fragmented. They integrate what was once exiled and reclaim the fullness of their being. This is what Jung called individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole by uniting the conscious and the unconscious. It is not about perfection, but balance, not about pleasing others, but embodying truth. When the empath rises from the underworld of their own psyche, They no longer mistake peace for silence or love for sacrifice. They no longer feel compelled to heal everyone. Instead, they live in a way that naturally brings healing through presence, not performance. In this rebirth, the empath becomes what Jung described as the self, the harmony of opposites, the balance of shadow and light. They understand that the darkness they once feared was never meant to destroy them, but to show them where they had hidden their light. The journey through the dark night is the initiation where every awakened soul must face the sacred turning point where one learns that the shadow is not the enemy, but the teacher. This is true spiritual wisdom. The realization that healing does not mean becoming pure, but becoming whole. And that by embracing the darkness within, you illuminate the world without. 7. Transformation and liberation. When the empath stops absorbing the chaos of others and turns inward, something within them begins to shift, a quiet revolution of the soul that transforms empathy into spiritual wisdom. What once felt like an endless battle to rescue, fix, and heal becomes a sacred process of remembering. They begin to understand that true healing does not come from sacrifice, but from presence. As Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And it is through this awakening that empathy matures into clarity, peace, and quiet strength. No longer ruled by emotional storms, the empath learns that love doesn't require self-abandonment, and compassion doesn't mean absorbing another's suffering. It means standing in calm awareness and allowing your stillness to guide others toward their own healing. At this stage of spiritual awakening, the empath realizes that their sensitivity is not a curse, but a compass. Every emotion they once carried from others becomes a mirror, revealing what needed balance within themselves. They begin to see how constantly taking responsibility for others' pain created a spiritual imbalance, one that drained their life force and clouded their intuition. But through this inner reflection, they discover that empathy is not about drowning in someone else's sorrow. It's about holding steady in the presence of it. This is where compassion transforms into power. When they stop trying to rescue others from their storms, they realize they can calm those storms simply by not being pulled into them. As awareness deepens, the empath begins to see through the illusions that once trapped them. They recognize the invisible patterns of control, manipulation, and guilt that often exist in family systems, especially when narcissistic dynamics are at play. Jung warned that the unconscious family patterns often repeat across generations until someone becomes conscious enough to break them. The empath becomes that person, the awakener. They see how they were conditioned to be the peacemaker, the emotional sponge, the one who absorbs pain to keep the family harmony intact. But now they understand that harmony built on self-erasure is not peace, it's bondage. True peace can only emerge when each soul takes ownership of its own energy. So, the empath withdraws not with anger, but with clarity. They step out of the dance, refusing to mirror dysfunction any longer, and in doing so, they shatter the illusion of control. This stage of transformation brings a calm detachment that is often misunderstood. It's not that the empath stops caring, it's that they start caring more intelligently. They learn to distinguish between compassion and codependency, between love and enmeshment. They begin to honor their boundaries as sacred spiritual gates that protect the purity of their energy. In this space, they find emotional neutrality, not coldness, but peace. They are no longer triggered by chaos because they see it as a projection of others' unhealed pain, not a reflection of their worth. In this neutrality, they reclaim their inner authority and radiate a quiet confidence that others can feel but cannot easily manipulate. Through this process, empathy becomes a higher frequency of consciousness. The empath now walks as both healer and witness, no longer lost in the suffering of others, but anchored in their own divine center. They embody what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating both light and shadow. They no longer fear their sensitivity. They honor it as their superpower. Their peace becomes their protection. Their detachment becomes their strength. And their presence becomes the silent sermon that awakens others. This is the moment when the empath transcends the family narcissism trap, not by fighting it, but by outgrowing it, by choosing awareness over reaction, sovereignty over sacrifice, and truth over illusion. In this state of spiritual awakening, empathy ceases to be suffering. It becomes liberation itself. If this message resonates with your soul and you're ready for your own transformation, say it with faith. I am free. I am healed. I am stepping into my spiritual liberation today. 8. The role of forgiveness and freedom. Forgiveness is not an act of submission, but one of profound liberation. It is the moment the empath chooses to step off the karmic wheel of endless reaction, to stop repeating the emotional patterns inherited from generations of pain. Forgiveness, in the truest spiritual sense, is not about excusing or forgetting what happened. It is about reclaiming your power. When you forgive, you free yourself from being the actor trapped in your family's ongoing drama and become the playwright who writes a new story rooted in awareness, peace, and self-mastery. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Forgiveness is how we make the unconscious conscious. It is how we transform the unseen pain into wisdom and refuse to let our past continue shaping our present. When you finally see that the people who hurt you were often driven by their own unhealed wounds, you stop internalizing their cruelty as your burden to carry. This is not about condoning their behavior. It is about breaking the energetic tie that keeps your spirit bound to cycles of suffering. Through the lens of spirituality and spiritual development, forgiveness becomes the sacred key that unlocks your heart from resentment and opens the door to freedom. Resentment is a form of bondage. It drains your energy, anchors you to the past, and prevents your light from expanding. Every time you forgive, you retrieve a lost part of yourself, a fragment of soul energy that was entangled in someone else's story. This act of release raises your vibration, moving you toward what Jung described as individuation, the process of becoming whole. You are no longer a divided being, craving love from those incapable of giving it. You are now someone who recognizes that your worth was never dependent on another's perception. Forgiveness becomes the bridge between pain and awakening, between the ego's need for justice and the soul's desire for peace. The empath's path to forgiveness is not a single act, but a series of awakenings. Each time you forgive, you dissolve another layer of inherited pain. It takes immense courage to look at your wounds with compassion rather than self-pity, to say with conviction, "The cycle ends with me." It is not weakness, It is emotional mastery. It is the moment your soul declares independence from the stories that once defined you. Forgiveness is what transforms pain into purpose and sorrow into strength. Through this inner alchemy, you learn that true freedom is not found in changing others, but in releasing your need for them to change. Freedom comes when you no longer feel obligated to carry what was never yours. You stop trying to fix those who refuse to heal themselves. You stop defining your identity through the lens of another's dysfunction. You release your need for external validation and realize that peace is an inside job. This is the essence of spiritual development, transcending the illusion of control, letting go with grace, and choosing to live in alignment with your higher truth. When you forgive, you rise beyond the drama of the past and reclaim your divine right to serenity. Forgiveness, then, is the highest expression of love, not for those who wronged you, but for yourself. It allows you to end the karmic play where pain once had the leading role. You stop being a character in a story written by unconscious minds and begin writing a narrative of conscious freedom. It is the sacred art of letting go. The moment the empath no longer seeks justice and suffering, but finds redemption and peace. Through forgiveness, you step fully into your power, embodying the truth that liberation begins the moment you stop reacting and start awakening. 9. Spiritual maturity and universal healing. Your personal healing is not only about you, it's about transforming the emotional DNA of your entire lineage. As Carl Jung taught through his timeless spiritual wisdom, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Every moment you bring awareness to your wounds, every time you choose truth over denial, you are freeing generations that came before you. Pain that once passed silently from parent to child becomes light in your hands. This is what it means to participate in universal healing, the empath's evolution from emotional survival to spiritual awakening. You are not merely recovering from your story. You are rewriting the collective script of your family's soul. Through this awakening, empathy matures into spiritual vision. You begin to see the divine in yourself and others, but this time, without losing your boundaries. You no longer confuse compassion with self-sacrifice. You no longer carry the pain that doesn't belong to you. Instead, you transmute it through consciousness. Each act of awareness becomes an offering, transforming darkness into understanding and suffering into sacred wisdom. You realize that true empathy is not about absorbing pain. It's about witnessing it with presence and love. As you do, your inner light grows stronger, guiding you toward authenticity, peace, and inner freedom. When you no longer seek approval from those who cannot see your soul, you step into individuation at the core of Jung's teaching. You stop rescuing others and start respecting yourself. You release the need to fix what is unwilling to heal. You learn that love is not endless giving. It is balance, reciprocity, and awareness. This realization is liberation itself. It is the turning point where you stop performing the role of the wounded empath and become the conscious creator of your reality. You begin to love differently, without control, without expectation, without losing your center. Your family becomes a sacred mirror, reflecting what your soul needs to see in order to grow. Some reflect pain, others clarity, and a few reveal the shadow you've been avoiding. But when you stop reacting and start observing, wisdom arises. You see that forgiveness isn't about inviting people back into your life. It's about freeing yourself from their hold. You no longer fight for validation. You embody it. Each emotional boundary you set is an act of divine self-respect, a declaration that your peace is holy. Spiritual maturity is when you can witness chaos without absorbing it, when you can feel deeply without losing yourself, and when you can love without abandoning your truth. This is the true meaning of spiritual awakening, not an escape from pain, but the mastery of it. When you embody awareness, your very presence becomes healing. You are no longer defined by the wounds of your past, but by the light you bring to them. And every conscious breath, every moment of clarity, every act of self-love sends ripples through the collective heart of humanity, reminding the world that healing is contagious, and love, when awakened, is the highest form of power. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights that nurture your spiritual awakening and inner peace. Comment below. I am ready to heal and live in divine harmony. 10. Final liberation. The empath finally understands that the family's narcissistic trap was never a curse. It was a hidden teacher, a painful but sacred mirror, forcing them to awaken from illusion. What once felt like punishment becomes a spiritual initiation, shaping their path toward individuation and higher consciousness. In the quiet, after years of emotional chaos, they begin to see that every manipulation, every act of control, every rejection was the soul's way of saying, remember who you are. Through the lens of spirituality and the wisdom of Carl Jung, they discover that the greatest healing is not in changing others, but in reclaiming the self. The empath, once bound by guilt and conditioned to please, learns to love without attachment and to feel without drowning. They rise from the ashes of dependency, embodying what Jung called the integration of opposites holding both light and shadow in sacred balance. This awakening is not born of hatred or revenge. It blooms from awareness. The empath stops absorbing others' pain and begins to observe it with compassion. They no longer chase validation from those who cannot give it. Instead, they become the source of their own peace. The spiritual awakening that emerges from such darkness is profound, for it transforms suffering into wisdom and boundaries into sacred space. The empath realizes that love without freedom is control, and empathy without discernment is self-abandonment. They begin to understand that spirituality is not about escaping reality, but about seeing it clearly with the eyes of consciousness rather than conditioning. What once kept them imprisoned, the need to fix, to save, to be accepted, now dissolves in the light of truth. They no longer need to prove their goodness because they have become one with it. The narcissistic family, once seen as the villain, now appears as a divine catalyst for awakening. It is through betrayal that the empath learned integrity, through rejection that they found belonging within, and through silence that they heard the voice of their own soul. They stop confusing love with sacrifice and begin to practice a higher form of love, one rooted in truth, not illusion. Jung's concept of individuation becomes their lived reality. They are no longer fragments molded by others' expectations, but whole beings guided by inner wisdom. Their journey shows that the family's dysfunction was never meant to destroy them. It was meant to awaken them to their divine potential. And so, they become living symbols of divine love, loving without bondage, feeling without absorption, and existing in a state of deep presence. Their aura carries the quiet strength of one who is seen through illusion, yet still chooses compassion. They embody the sacred lesson of spiritual awakening, that freedom is not found by changing the world, but by transforming the self. The empath's liberation becomes a message to all who listen, that what once felt like a curse was, in truth, the universe's way of leading you back home to your own soul. When the empath finally awakens to the family narcissism trap, the truth can feel painful, but it's also the beginning of freedom. Remember, awareness is the first step toward reclaiming your energy and rewriting the story of your own worth. You are not here to fix others. You are here to honor your light. If this message resonates with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos filled with insight and healing. When you have no one, that's when you rise. In solitude, the spirit finds strength. Carl Jung reminds us that the most powerful transformations often happen when we stand alone, when there's no applause, no validation, no one to witness the battles we fight in silence. In those quiet moments, a different kind of power awakens within us, the kind that builds resilience, self-trust, and unstoppable inner growth. As you watch today's video, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever felt like the world was silent while you were working so hard to rise? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you're ready to discover how isolation can become the birthplace of your greatest evolution, welcome to Spiritual Wisdom. Let's rise together. 1. Solitude is the start of transformation. Solitude is the beginning of a powerful transformation, because when everything around you becomes quiet, your soul begins to speak. Feeling alone, unseen, and disconnected does not mean you have failed. It means your spirit is separating from an outdated version of you that can no longer contain your potential. Loneliness becomes a silent teacher, pushing you to strengthen your foundation from within. When there is no applause, you learn to celebrate your own growth. When no one believes in you, spirituality teaches you to believe in yourself. When no one stands with you, you learn to stand with your truth. This is where spiritual awakening begins, not in comfort, but in the quiet battles that no one else sees. There are seasons when every person who once stood beside you suddenly disappears, and it feels like a punishment. But Carl Jung reminds us that every rebirth begins with dissolution. The universe removes the people who were attached to your old identity so you can evolve without being pulled backward. The silence you face today is not abandonment, it is elevation. Not everyone is meant to breathe at the altitude your soul is rising to, and the loneliness you feel now is building emotional strength, mental clarity, and an unshakable identity that does not rely on approval. This is where the old layers fall away. This is where your heart begins to glow from the inside out. This is where you remember who you are. In this sacred isolation, you begin to discover the person you have been searching for, the one who protects you, guides you, and truly understands you yourself. You realize that depending on others for validation was only weakening your light. Now, your power becomes self-generated, no longer borrowed from temporary relationships. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces not worthy of your presence. You stop hoping others will love the version of you they never cared to understand. Instead, you rise with calm confidence, knowing your worth does not change just because others failed to see it. As Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." And you, right now, are awakening. You are transforming. You are rising into the life your soul has always been preparing you for. So when the world grows silent, when support fades, when love disappears, and when every familiar hand lets go, this is not the end. This is your becoming. The loneliness shaping you today will be the reason you lead others tomorrow. You are not alone because you are forgotten. You are alone because you are evolving into someone rare, someone resilient, someone chosen. Solitude is not emptiness. It is the birthplace of your strength. Keep going. The strongest version of you is now being formed in the quiet. Are you ready to rise even when you stand alone? If this message speaks to your soul, comment below. I rise from solitude to claim your transformation. 2. Emotional independence replaces emotional dependence. When you stop expecting others to fix what hurts inside you, everything changes. Emotional independence replaces emotional dependence the moment you decide you will no longer look for someone else to fill the emptiness in your chest. You begin to understand that true growth starts when you can calm your own heart, wipe your own tears, and accept your own feelings without begging for reassurance. Instead of waiting for someone to validate you, you learn to validate yourself. Instead of searching for external love to feel whole, you choose to love yourself from within. This is where spirituality takes root, when your happiness is no longer controlled by who stays or who leaves. You unlock a new stage of spiritual development that can never be taken away from you. You see, every time someone ignored your pain, every time you felt invisible, every time you whispered to yourself that you were not enough, those moments were not failures. They were invitations. They pushed you toward discovering the strength you did not know you had. Because when you have no one clapping for you, you learn how to clap for yourself. When no one comforts you, you become the comfort. When no one believes in you, you become your own proof. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." That is exactly what emotional independence teaches you, that your worth does not shrink just because someone else could not see it. And here's the truth you must carry with you. The right people will come into your life, not because you desperately chase them, but because your energy will rise so high that they cannot help but find you. The loneliness you feel is not a punishment. It is a sacred transition. It is the universe removing distractions so you can finally hear your own voice. In this silence, your spirit wakes up. You stop over-explaining. You stop over-giving. You stop trying to be loved into existence. You start choosing peace over approval, truth over acceptance, and growth over comfort. That is when you rise. So give yourself permission to outgrow the version of you that depended on others to feel alive. You are stronger than your heartbreak. You are bigger than your fears. You are wiser because of every person who walked away. And now, you are learning the most important lesson of your spiritual journey. You do not need someone to complete you. You need someone who complements the wholeness you have already built. Stand tall inside your own soul. Respect your own emotions. Stop waiting for anyone else to define your value. The moment you become emotionally independent, you become unstoppable because the power was always yours. If you're ready to rise stronger from within, declare it in the comments. I rely on my inner strength. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss more spiritual wisdom on this powerful journey. 3. Stop complaining and take responsibility. When you feel the world turning cold and silent around you, when support disappears and you are left alone with your thoughts, this is not the universe abandoning you. This is the universe awakening you. Complaining might feel like a release, but every complaint keeps you chained to victimhood, locked in a story where life is happening to you instead of for you. The moment you shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to, "What can I build from this?" you step into a new level of spiritual wisdom that Carl Jung often spoke about: the power to transform pain into progress, chaos into clarity, and loneliness into leadership. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And that is the turning point. Choosing responsibility does not mean you caused the pain. It means you refuse to let the pain decide your future. When people stop supporting you, when encouragement disappears, when no one sees your effort, that silence is molding you into someone who doesn't rise because they are seen, but because they are called. You are being trained to no longer depend on applause or validation. The world won't always cheer for your growth, but your soul will, and that must be enough. Complaining tells the universe, "I am powerless." Taking responsibility tells the universe, "Watch what I become." Every challenge you are facing right now is shaping you into someone unshakable. Diamonds are born under pressure. Stars shine brightest in the darkest sky. Seeds break in the darkness beneath the soil before they rise toward the sun. You, too, are breaking open not to be destroyed, but to be reborn. When you stop complaining, you stop giving power to what hurts you. You stop replaying the same painful story and start writing a new one. You take the raw material of your struggle and build resilience, courage, and wisdom that cannot be taken from you. That is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "There is no birth of consciousness without pain." Awakening begins the moment you realize your suffering is not a dead end, it is a doorway. Responsibility is not a burden, it is your liberation. It is you saying, "Life can knock me down, but I decide whether I stay there." The world may walk away, but that is exactly when you walk closer to your true identity. Silence becomes your teacher. Solitude becomes your training ground. Pain becomes your power source. So the next time your heart whispers, "Why me?" answer it with, "Because I am strong enough to rise." You do not grow when others carry you. You grow when you carry yourself. And when no one believes in you, that is when you must believe in yourself the loudest. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful guidance like this. And if you're ready to rise by taking responsibility for your life, type in the comments, "I choose accountability and growth." 4. Become your own source of validation. There are moments in life when the silence around you becomes almost deafening. The people you once counted on to notice your growth disappear, and suddenly, every step you take goes unseen. That is when spirituality reveals one of its greatest lessons. You must become your own source of validation. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and this path of becoming is often walked alone." When there is no applause, when the voices of approval go quiet, you are forced to discover the voice within the one that guides you not toward recognition, but toward your truth. This is where real maturity begins, because maturity means acting for your values, even when no one praises you for them. You are like a seed planted deep beneath the soil. No one witnesses the struggle, the pressure, the darkness, the cracking open. But without that hidden battle, the seed would never develop roots strong enough to push upward into the light. That is how spiritual awakening works. Isolation is not punishment, but preparation. The universe removes the audience so you can learn who you are without their validation. It is in the quiet hours when no one sees your effort that your character is forged. You learn to show up for yourself, to honor the promises you made to your future, not because the world is watching, but because you are. Carl Jung also said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." When relationships fade, when encouragement stops, when recognition disappears, it hurts, but that pain is awakening you to deeper truths. Your worth is not measured by applause, and your purpose does not require witnesses. The absence of others teaches you independence of spirit. You begin to understand that support is a gift, not a requirement. You start to trust your intuition more than the opinions around you. You learn that validation from others can disappear, but validation from within can sustain you for a lifetime. Every time you choose to keep going in silence, you build spiritual strength that cannot be shaken later. When you continue working on your dream despite being overlooked, you become driven by mission instead of approval. And that is unstoppable. One day, those same people who didn't notice your effort will be astonished by your results. They will call you fortunate, unaware of the countless silent battles that shaped who you are. They won't see the nights you stayed committed, the tears you wiped alone, the weight you carried in your heart while still pushing forward. So if life has placed you in a season where you feel like you have no one, understand this: you are being positioned for transformation. You are being trained to believe in yourself the way you always hoped others would. You are being guided to recognize your own power, your own inner voice, your own divine light. That is spiritual wisdom, and that is the moment your spirit rises higher than ever before. Because when you no longer need anyone to choose you, support you, or validate you, that is when you become truly powerful. And that is when you rise. 5. Turn failure into fuel. Falling never destroys you. It simply reveals the parts of your soul that are still waiting to be healed. And when you rise from failure without anyone beside you, you begin stepping into a deeper level of spirituality and spiritual development, where your strength is no longer borrowed from external praise, but grown from the truth within yourself. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And every moment you choose to rise is a declaration of who you are becoming: stronger, wiser, more resilient, and more conscious of the power that lives inside you. When life refuses to give you applause, validation, or comfort, see it as a divine invitation to meet the strongest version of yourself. Because if everyone caught you every time you fell, you would never learn how powerful your legs truly are. So when you fall, Do not rush to hide the broken pieces. Study them, understand them, and use them as building blocks for your transformation. Because failure is not the opposite of success. It is the foundation of it. Every time you rise alone, you sharpen your character and expand your capacity to handle the weight of your highest destiny. And even though the process feels lonely, that loneliness is sacred. It pushes you inward, where you finally discover the voice of your own spirit saying, "You can endure, you can overcome, you can rise again." Challenges are not punishment. They are preparation, shaping you into someone who will no longer crumble under pressure or fear judgment from others. And each setback forces you to ask deeper questions, connect to your true purpose, and step into a higher state of awareness. When you shift your perspective from seeing failure as a dead end to recognizing it as a divine turning point, you begin to turn every disappointment into discipline and every fall into fuel that propels you even farther than before. People may leave when you stumble, but their absence is not a loss. It is a filter, removing those who were only meant to witness your comfort, not your greatness. The silence you face after failure is not emptiness. It is space being cleared so you can rebuild with clarity, strength, and authenticity. You grow into someone who no longer begs for support, but attracts it naturally because your confidence radiates from a place of truth and lived experience. You become someone who has walked through fire and emerged glowing, someone whose soul cannot be shaken because it has already survived what was meant to break it. So trust this season, trust the fall, trust the alone phases of your life. Every tear, every setback, every night you stay awake questioning whether you can keep going, is forging a more powerful version of you, one who no longer fears falling, but understands that falling is just part of rising. Failure is fuel in disguise, and you are learning to burn brighter every time the world tries to dim your light. Do you believe that every failure can become fuel for your rise? If you do, declare it boldly in the comments. I turn failure into power. 6. Discipline over mood. Discipline over mood means choosing to act based on who you want to become, rather than how you feel in the moment. Because real growth is not born from excitement or perfect circumstances, but from the days when you show up, even when your heart feels heavy and your mind wants to rest. This is where spiritual wisdom becomes your anchor. For motivation is temporary and unreliable, but discipline is the force that separates people who wish from those who rise. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Reminding you that every choice you make in silence, every step taken without applause, is molding your future self. When you stop waiting to feel ready and instead choose consistency, you claim responsibility for your destiny, and that commitment is what turns an ordinary person into someone unstoppable. You must understand that mastery is never built on good moods. It is sculpted through repetition, through focus, through the willingness to do the hard things, especially when your emotions are resisting. On the days you feel alone and forgotten, spiritual wisdom teaches that your soul is quietly preparing you for a powerful transformation, because Jung believed solitude is the birthplace of inner strength, where the ego dissolves and the true self emerges. So when no one praises your efforts or recognizes your progress, that is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you are being forged strengthened, and sharpened in the unseen. Each act of discipline casts a vote for the person you aspire to be, and over time, those small votes accumulate until one day you look back and realize you have become the kind of person who no longer waits for motivation at all. Discipline is a deep expression of self-respect, a declaration that your purpose matters more than your excuses, more than your momentary feelings. Every time you honor your commitments, you strengthen trust in yourself, and that trust becomes confidence, and that confidence becomes power. Think of every successful person you admire. They rose because they showed up when comfort told them to stop. They practiced when no one noticed, improved when no one applauded, and stayed loyal to their growth when the world stayed silent. You must do the same because your future depends on it. Jung taught that what you resist not only persists, but grows, meaning that if you keep avoiding the work, your fear and doubt will only gain more control. But when you discipline your mind to move forward, even in discomfort, you reclaim authority over your life. Your feelings may fluctuate, but your purpose must remain steady. Your emotions may shout, "Quit," but your spirit must whisper, "Keep going." Discipline over mood is the secret to rising when no one believes in you. Because one day, the world will witness the success you built quietly in the dark, and they will call you lucky without ever knowing it was your discipline that made you powerful. If you find this content touching your heart, please consider becoming a member to receive more in-depth lessons and direct support from me. 7. Stop needing others to understand you. Stop needing others to understand you, because the truth is that your journey is sacred and uniquely designed for your soul's evolution. No one else has lived your memories, carried your pain, or dreamt the visions planted deep inside your heart. So it is impossible for others to fully grasp the depths of what you are becoming. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that privilege does not require permission or validation from anyone outside of you. When you begin to detach from the desire for others to accept you or agree with your choices, you open the door to a powerful spiritual awakening where your inner voice becomes your greatest guide. You start to realize that every answer you have been searching for was always waiting within you, quietly whispering beneath the noise of people's opinions and the world's expectations. It takes extraordinary courage to walk through life without applause, to move forward when no one is cheering, and to continue choosing growth even when others cannot see the reason for your actions. But that is what makes you different. That is what makes you strong. Most people never find themselves because they are too busy trying to be understood. You are not here to be understood. You are here to rise. And rising requires a certain level of solitude because not everyone is meant to join you on your highest path. Some people cannot comprehend your evolution simply because they are not evolving with you. Some people cannot see your vision because they were not given the eyes to recognize it. So instead of shrinking yourself so others feel comfortable, you must allow yourself to expand even if others become uncomfortable. It might hurt when people misjudge you, distance themselves from you, or question your motives. But remember this: misunderstanding is often a sign that you are stepping into a higher version of yourself. You are breaking out of the identity they once knew, and the unfamiliar always makes others uneasy. Let them misunderstand. Let them doubt. Let them talk. Their lack of understanding does not change your calling. What you are building is too sacred to be explained to small minds, and your transformation is too miraculous to be measured by shallow perceptions. The universe did not choose them. It chose you. And chosen souls are shaped through isolation, strengthened through adversity, and awakened through moments when they must walk alone. The more you trust yourself, the clearer your path becomes. The more you listen inward, the less noise exists outward. Your soul becomes your compass, your intuition becomes your wisdom, and your silence becomes your teacher. Slowly, you step out of the need to prove yourself, and you enter the freedom of being yourself. You no longer rise to be seen. You rise because rising is your nature. And even if no one understands it, your heart understands it. God understands it. Your future understands it. So keep moving forward. Keep listening inward. Keep honoring the sacred truth that everything you need is already within you. Because the moment you stop seeking external understanding is the moment you finally step into your true power. The power of a soul that knows exactly who it is and where it is meant to go. In the moments when the world feels silent and support seems nowhere to be found, remember this truth. Solitude is not a punishment. It is preparation. It is in the quiet, unseen battles that your inner strength is forged. Your purpose becomes clearer, and your soul rises into the power it was destined to claim. You are not behind. You are becoming. If this message resonates with you, let your journey be seen like this video. Share it with someone who might need this reminder, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to activate the notification bell so you never miss the powerful insights we have coming your way. Keep rising, even when no one is watching.